Hi, I'm Alex.
And I'm Danny.
And we're seriously nerdy
about Fallout. For this build, we were inspired by the Red Rocket fueling station seen in the Fallout universe. So to get started, we plotted out an original vertical-oriented sign in Adobe Illustrator, and then we printed those files on our Glowforge Spark.
We wouldn't be able to use the Glowforge to print the curved side of the sign, so instead we pulled out some flexible styrene. Also, the Glowforge didn't cut all the way through in certain places on the base plate, so we ended up drilling the holes instead. We airbrushed everything with a base of primer, and then we used white blue for the lettering and a mixture of red and orange for the sign itself. Once everything had finished drying, we laid it all out, and then we glued the faceplate onto the backplate with a liberal helping of wood glue. I initially used wood glue to start attaching these outlines to the individual letters, but I quickly realized that that was too messy and took too long to clean up and was going to dry yellow, so I switched to CA glue.
Although super obnoxious to glue in, those little outlines around the letters really help sell this as a neon sign, since most neon signs have that dimensional aspect of their letters.
And with the initial gluing and assembly out of the way, we got to move on to the weathering. Since we're essentially creating a 200-year-old gas station sign, we knew it was only appropriate to create huge pockets of rust eating away at the metal. Unfortunately, my beautifully masked off stripes were not well masked off, and the paint seeped right under it, so I ended up cleaning up those lines. Never you mind though, because I'm just gonna cover it in muck and mire anyway.
It's a classic, seriously nerdy technique. We cover all of our mistakes in weathering. But in addition to these big pockets of rust, we also found ways to use paint chips and drips just to make it look like this sign has survived a nuclear apocalypse. Barely.
As much as I'm sure you'd like to see me do the same weathering on the other side of the sign, for the sake of time, let's just say I did it. And it's done.
Hey look, it's done! Just like the other side!
We used some epoxy sculpt to fill in the little cracks in between the side slats that did not quite perfectly fit together. I figure once this is all painted, it'll just look like welding anyway. Then I measured and cut our flexible styrene for the curved edge, making sure to leave a little excess so that I could cut it away. For the base of the sign, we created a platform and then made sure to drill holes both through the base of the sign and through the platform for our wires to run through safely.
This healing mat may never heal.
We glowforged a couple of feetsies and then got those glued in place, and then we painted everything with a beautiful steel paint.
Who knew MDF would look so pretty when you paint it with steel paint?
After that dried, we added a coat of chipping medium, let that dry, and then covered the whole thing in white and red paint. I know somebody's going to ask why we didn't use chipping medium on the entire sign and we only used it on the base of the sign. To be honest, we weren't sure it was going to work very well on Glowforge cut wood, but after working on the feetsies of this sign, I actually think it would have worked great, and I will probably use it a lot more in the future. For the third leg of our three-legged stool, we used a clear tube that we could run our wires through. In order to simulate a poured concrete, we mixed together some sand and some plaster of Paris and some wood glue, and made a nice little goopy concoction that we could spread over the entire tube. Once that was dried, we painted it, cement gray. Once we had the base of our sign all constructed and set aside to dry, we then moved our attention back to installing the LED lights in the face of our sign. We threaded a number of LED noodles through pre-drilled holes in the sign and then used craft copper wire to hold the noodles in place so it looked just like real neon. On my initial pass, I tried to cut little horseshoes of copper wire to hold the neon in place, but this turned out to be much more complicated than just running it through the back of the sign. After performing a test to make sure all my noodle boys worked properly, I then turned my attention to soldering all of the wires. I am by no means an electrical expert. I recommend you do your own research, but what we did here was we ran all of these in parallel and then covered all of our intersections with heat shrink to protect them. Once everything was tested and secured, I ran the wires through the base of the sign and then glued the box closed. While heat shrinking, I accidentally got a little too close to my styrene, so I did end up having to melt it back into shape, which was a little unfortunate.
Now, if you're watching all of this thinking, wow, these are technical wizards and I could never wire electronics, please know we've only been doing this for about a year. And as intimidating as it was at first, everything you need to know is online, it's approachable, all of the components you can find very easily on Amazon. So if this is something you're interested in, please pursue it. The internet has so many resources for you, and it's not as intimidating as you think. That being said, maybe you're just here for tiny props and not electronics at all, in which case, I am your girl. I was in charge of the props and base portion of this build, letting Alex handle the beautiful sign, so I turned my attention to this cute little sandwich board that's going to sit at the base of the neon sign. Now, our little diorama has never been seen in the Fallout universe before, so we were able to take a lot of creative liberties when it came to all components of this build. For example, the vertical format of a red rocket sign doesn't exist in Fallout, but the design itself was inspired by signs from the 50s and 60s, with typeface that was very similar to the red rocket typeface, so it feels like it might fit, but it's entirely made up. The same thing goes for this sandwich board, which is going to give the coolant prices of the era. It's inspired by sandwich boards from the 1950s and 60s that would have listed gasoline prices. Ours, of course, lists coolant prices and has a lot of those same design details that we see on the Red Rocket signs, like the circles and the little Red Rocket logo at the bottom. I came dangerously close to purchasing 1/12 scale cinder blocks from the internet, but I realized I only really needed a couple of them, and I decided to save some pennies and 3D print our own. Now, of course, out of the 3D printer, they looked a little plasticky, but with a quick coat of that magic plaster of Paris wood glue sand mixture and a quick coat of paint, they looked semi-passable as concrete blocks.
I knocked together a quick 3D model of a rocket using Nomad Sculpt 3D, and then we printed it on our 3D printer and painted it up just like the rest of the diorama.
And since I haven't learned Nomad Sculpt yet, I used Tinkercad to quickly sculpt these broken bottles, printed them in clear filament, and then used a quick green wash to make them look like glass. This shadow box is a sneak peek of a future project, but we are going to rate it for the cork backing inside of it. We've seen several makers use this torn apart cork to resemble pavement or asphalt, so after taking all of the foam backing off of it, we were left with sheets of just cork that we could coat with a plaster texture, and when dry, resembles concrete pretty convincingly. To get this effect, you spread the plaster on top of the cork sheet, you let it dry until it's brittle, and then you tear it apart into pieces. The hardest part being remembering where all of the pieces go so that you can reassemble it convincingly like a beautiful little cracked puzzle. For the part of the base that doesn't have a concrete slab on it, I used some Citadel technical effects to create soil that's going to crack up as it dries to look like a desert terrain. The nice thing about using cork and plaster is that although it resembles a really hard concrete surface, it's pretty easy to score and cut through to ensure that we can still run our wires or place the feet of our sign. Is it just me, or does it look like the Death Star? Definitely looks like the Death Star. That's no moon, it's a space station. No, it's a base to a diorama. With all of the elements glued down, I could finally do the really fun part of this, which is layers and layers of paint and stain and dry brushing to make this look like the most weathered concrete that has endured nuclear blasts after nuclear blast. And boy, was it fun, because we are working at 1/12 scale, which for us is gigantic.
No Fallout diorama would be complete without a cameo from everyone's favorite vault door shape. So for the frame for the base, we created a 9-spoked cog and then mounted the base onto it.
Believe me when I say that along the way we tested the circuits in the neon lights to make sure they worked at every stage, because the worst thing that can happen is you finish assembling the diorama and the lights don't work. So, hot tip, make sure you test the circuits throughout. But the circuits were working, which meant that we could glue the sign down and then start making our final pass at the little details and weathering that would make the whole thing look cohesive. This was also the time that we could complete the circuit and attach the battery pack. My favorite part of any build is the very last staging elements that really bring the whole scene to life. So the last step was to glue all of our tiny prop components in place, like the sandwich board, the cinder blocks, and the little broken Nuka-Cola bottles, before placing the entire sign under its glass dome.
Why are you this way?